On Saturday mornings, the cul-de-sac woke with the polite hum of perfection. Sprinklers ticked across clipped lawns, labradoodles tugged their owners past tidy hedges, and the smell of single-origin coffee drifted from kitchens where people used the good mugs. From the bay window of her white brick colonial, Claire Weston watched a blue jay bully two sparrows off the bird feeder and thought, not for the first time, how aggression could wear the prettiest colors. "Sweetheart?" The florist dropped the peonies. "They're gorgeous." Daniel's voice sailed in from the foyer, smooth, public radio warm. He never shouted, even his annoyance came in a tasteful register. Claire lifted her chin from her hand and turned. At 47, she was practiced at smoothing her face as easily as she smoothed duvet covers. She moved through the lemon-lit kitchen, the quartz island shining like a frozen pond, and stepped into the sun-bright foyer where Daniel stood with a tall cylinder of palest pink blooms. He already wore his Saturday uniform, navy polo, tan chinos, boat shoes. He looked like a man who'd been born in a golf catalogue. "They're lovely," she said, taking the vase. Her voice carried the faint huskiness that had appeared around 45. She'd once hated it on recordings, but now sometimes it struck her as interesting, as if time had penciled depth into her throat. "Put them on the dining table," Daniel said, already moving toward the living room. 9 families are SVP'd yes, and I think the Wilsons will come if the rain holds off. We should be ready for 11:30. We. The royal plural of suburban hostessing. Claire smiled, because smiling oil-slicked everything, conversations, schedules, the way tension slid past without catching. "I'll set the table. Use the gray napkins. The linen ones." He turned, remembering something. "And the silver. Not the everyday." He didn't need to tell her, she'd already pulled the linen earlier that week, smoothing the faint creases from their hibernation. But Daniel liked to give instructions. It reassured him to feel the world align under his voice, like place cards he could reposition until the room was balanced. They were throwing a garden brunch for the neighborhood newcomers. The invitation had gone out on heavy cardstock, cream with black script, her handwriting scanned and printed because it feels more personal. This was Daniel's phrase, though the looped letters were hers. His firm handled wealth management. His clients liked the sense that their money was in the hands of a man whose life had never seen a wrinkle. Claire set the vase at the center of the dining table and stepped back. The room had the kind of quiet that suggested wealth and insulation: crown molding, grass-cloth walls, a sideboard that had belonged to Daniel's grandmother and now belonged to the story about Daniel's grandmother that he told at parties. She adjusted a fork so it aligned perfectly with the plate's rim, then moved to the sideboard to check the backup glasses, because one always chips. One always chips, and she knew which neighbor would lift which glass and where to stand so she could swap it before the person noticed the flaw. In the mirror above the sideboard, her reflection studied her. Her hair, dark with a ribbon of white at the temple, was twisted into a low knot. She wore a white shirt and dark jeans. The dress would come later. She could have looked like a real estate agent staging herself for an open house. But behind the professional neatness lived a woman who had, this morning, sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and titled a page, "Things That I Actually Want." She'd stared at the blank paper until the kettle screamed. Now she touched the corner of the mirror, an old habit, like tapping wood, and went back to work. By 11, the backyard was a magazine spread, a canopy of white sailcloth casting cool triangles across the lawn, 3 round tables with pale gray runners, a buffet with platters of smoked salmon and grilled asparagus, and a bar stocked to please any algorithm. Claire's friend and sometimes conspirator Evelyn had texted earlier, "Need me? I can swing by." But Evelyn had a daughter's soccer tournament, and anyway Daniel liked the 2-person ballet of hosting. He believed in appearances, and he believed in their ability to execute them as a team, even if the choreography was mostly his. Guests arrived in mild waves, the Millers with a toddler like a miniature tornado in patent shoes, the Wilsons after all, late and apologetic, the new couple from Denver Trish and Tom, with hand soap that smelled expensive and hugs that felt sincere. Daniel greeted everyone with that practiced warmth, the one that made people relax because they felt seen in a flattering light. He guided conversations the way he managed portfolios: ease, pivot, add flourish. Claire played her part with the skill of a violinist who can play lullabies while thinking of symphonies. She remembered everyone's name, refilled drinks, and intercepted disasters, the toddler's fist reaching for a candle flame, a chair leg catching on the grass. People told her she had a gift for making a room feel effortless. They didn't see the effort. That was the point. So what do you do, Claire? Asked Trish from Denver, leaning in as if the question were a kindness, not a wire. I mean, your home is incredible. Do you work in design? Claire smiled. There it was, the soft net that always dropped. I ran a small communications firm before we moved here, she said lightly. Now I consult. Part-time. Which was true if you defined consulting as occasionally ghostwriting board speeches for an old client and being paid in gift cards because the work felt like picking up a past life's cardigan from a chair, draping it around her shoulders for an hour, then carefully folding it away before anyone noticed. Impressive, Trish said. I keep telling Tom I need a project or I'll start alphabetizing the spice rack again. Don't knock alphabetizing, Daniel said, appearing with a glass of sparkling water that he handed to Claire, though she'd asked for iced tea. He put an arm around her waist, casual, proprietary. She once color-coded our books by hue. It was like living inside a yogurt commercial. Laughter. Claire took the water because the story asked her to. Her throat wanted tea, her hand held bubbles. Tell the Denver folks about your fundraiser, he added, smiling down at her. She chaired the whole thing. Brought in 6 figures for the Arts Center. I had a good committee, she said. She did not add that she'd wanted the youth orchestra to receive the majority of the funds, and Daniel had pushed for a new donor lounge instead because that's where future money is trained to feel at home. She didn't add that after the gala, alone in their bedroom, she'd argued, quietly, because he hated volume, with a passion that felt like an organ trying to break out of a ribcage, and he'd called her idealism charming and unrealistic. She'd stayed quiet for a week. He'd brought home flowers and a bracelet. The lounge went in. Now he kissed her temple. A tableau. Click. Across the lawn, a neighbor was telling a story about their trip to the Amalfi Coast, the lemons the size of infants. Evelyn's voice rose from memory. You can keep the lemons and lose yourself, or you can peel your life back to the pith and figure out what's real. It had been a book club night, Pinot Noir and a novel about late-life reinvention. Claire had laughed then, an indulgent sound, as if reinvention were a thing one bought on Etsy. By 1:30, plates were stacked, compliments delivered, and the sun had shifted to soften the edges of everything. People lingered longer than they meant to. That too was part of the choreography. Daniel managed exits as deftly as entrances, gentle cues ushering people toward their cars with a feeling of abundance rather than impatience. When the last guest waved through the windshield and the street exhaled into quiet, Daniel shut the front door and let his smile dim a few watts. The Millers are chaos, he said, moving toward the kitchen. We should avoid sitting near them at the block party. Claire carried a stack of plates to the sink. Their daughter's 3. 3 is chaos by definition. He was already loading the dishwasher, precise in the placement of bowls, the angle of water access. Did you see Tom's watch? Patek. Not the basic one, either. We should invite them to the club. Claire rinsed a glass, set it into the rack. Trish asked about my work, she said, then heard the choice embedded in the sentence, how she had said Trish and not I. I told her I consult. Good, Daniel said. He straightened, wiped his hands on a towel, then hung the towel perfectly even. It's better. More flexible. For what? The question slipped and landed between them, a fish flopping on tile. He looked at her as if she had asked why people need oxygen. For us. For things like today. For the life we have. His face softened into that rational, reasonable calm that always made her question whether she was the unreasonable one. You were so stressed when you ran the firm full-time. Remember? The deadlines, the travel. You said your chest felt tight all the time. I was 38. She reached for another plate. Tight was how ambition fit then. You're happier now, he said. Not a question. She let the water run too long. Am I? He smiled, but it felt like a hand being placed gently over her mouth. Of course. Look around. He gestured, the sun-glazed countertops, the bowl of lemons, standard-sized, the fresh peonies in their vase. This is what we built. You're brilliant at this, Claire. People love you. She thought of the notepad with its unmarked page. Things that I actually want. A line drawn but not crossed. By the way, Daniel added, moving to the island. He picked up her phone, which she'd left next to the bowl of lemons. I saw Evelyn texted earlier. I don't think she's great for you right now. Claire dried her hands. Evelyn is my friend. I know. He placed the phone down, face down. But she's, you know how she is. Always pushing women to question everything. She's divorced. She projects. He said it kindly, the way someone would advise you not to eat dairy if your stomach was delicate. She pushed me to run for the non-profit board, Claire said. That turned out well. For the arts center, he corrected mildly. It was a good stepping stone. He reached for her, fingers circling her wrist, warm, gentle, in a way that could be read as intimacy from a distance. You have good instincts. You just get swayed sometimes. You're soft-hearted. It's one of the things I adore about you. At the word adore, something inside her, something that used to flare under praise, felt like it had been turned down to pilot light. He let her wrist go and smiled his closing argument smile. Let's do dinner at Russo's tonight. 6:30. I can get us that table by the window. I have book club, she said. Can't you skip? The question wasn't a demand. It was a request sealed with expectation. We've barely had a night out, just the two of us this month. Book club was women in flats with laugh lines and opinions, spicy pasta in someone's kitchen, a bottle of red open on the counter, conversation that could go tender or sharp and was no one's business but theirs. Book club was where Evelyn had said, "What do you want?" not "What do you maintain?" Book club was where Claire's answer had been a startled laugh and then silence. "I'll see," she said. He kissed her cheek. "Good girl." When he left the kitchen, the bananas on the counter suddenly looked like a still life with subtext. Claire picked up her phone, turned it face up. 3 texts from Evelyn. Survived soccer. Did you survive brunch? Also, are we still on for Wednesday coffee? I need your brilliant brain on an idea. If Daniel reads this, tell him I said hi and I'm sorry for corrupting you with feminism and croissants. Claire smiled despite herself. Her thumb hovered. Don't do the old seesaw. She typed, brunch was a success, obviously. Wednesday is good. 10. Also, corruption continues apace. She hit send and felt that small illegal thrill in her chest, like stepping barefoot onto cool grass, like saying a true thing to yourself in a quiet room. She looked toward the doorway. No Daniel. No witness. Upstairs, in the bedroom she curated like a hotel suite. Crisp sheets, gentle grays, no clutter. She opened the top drawer of her nightstand and slid out the notepad. The page from this morning waited, blank except for the title. Things that I actually want. She wrote, to be asked how I am and mean it when I answer. She paused. Then added, to work with words again and have them matter. Another line, to choose my own small daily things without explanation. She stared at that last one until it blurred. Small daily things, tea not water, book club not dinner, a phone faced up. From downstairs, Daniel's voice floated, Claire? Did you move my cufflinks? The silver knots. She closed the notepad, slid it back and called, on your dresser by the valet tray. Found them, he said, and she heard the contentment in his voice that came from the world returning his belongings to the places he preferred them to be. A blue jay screeched at the window, the sound a thin metal tear. Claire stood, smoothed the bedspread, and looked out at the yard where the canopy had become a billowing cloud, the tables now empty circles on a chessboard of lawn. She watched the sailcloth billow and imagined, sudden and fierce, cutting the tether lines and letting it go, white against the sky, a shape untethering. A ridiculous thought. A dangerous one. 6:30. Daniel called, voice coaxing again. I'll text you, she answered, and heard how it sounded, like a concession, like a question, like a woman practicing the shape of a boundary with her tongue. Her phone vibrated. Evelyn again, if you want to skip book club for dinner, I'll cover for you. If you want to skip dinner for book club, I'll also cover for you. If you want to do neither and sit in your car with me and eat drive-through fries like we're 19, I will absolutely cover for you. Claire laughed out loud, a small sharp note in the tidy air. She typed, I might take you up on the fries. She stood at the window until her reflection layered over the backyard, a woman looking at a woman looking out. The blue jay hopped to the feeder again, bright and unrepentant. This time the sparrows didn't scatter. They held their small ground, a few seconds longer than before. It wasn't a revolution. It was a pause. It was a beginning disguised as hesitation. Downstairs, Daniel began to whistle, tuneful and certain, as if everything in the house were harmonizing with him. Claire put a hand to the glass, cool and steady, and let her fingers rest there. She didn't move them. Not yet. The brunch had been a triumph, of course. By Sunday evening, the neighbors' social media posts bloomed with photos of Claire's tablescapes, the delicate peonies, and Daniel raising a glass mid-toast. They tagged her, praised her. Effortless elegance, one caption read. Claire liked them all with the appropriate graciousness, then closed her phone. When the last ding of approval faded, the house settled into its true register. Daniel was in his study, the glass doors shut. Claire sat at the edge of their bed, still in the navy dress she had worn to dinner the night before. She hadn't gone to book club. Evelyn had sent a single message, fries next time. No explanations needed. Claire stared at the mirror across from her. Her hair was still perfect, pinned in place, as if the evening had ended just moments ago instead of hours. She thought of the question Evelyn had once asked, when was the last time you let yourself look undone? She didn't answer then. She couldn't answer now. Daniel's study was a shrine to order, leather-bound ledgers, photographs from Harvard and Yale, a globe positioned precisely beside the mahogany desk. Claire entered quietly, the way one steps into a church. Daniel looked up from his laptop. Finally, he said, voice mild. I was waiting. For what? For you. He gestured at the chair opposite him. His smile was soft, persuasive, the one that made people agree before they thought about it. Sit. She did. He closed the laptop, folding his hands. You've been distracted lately. Claire kept her face composed. Distracted? Yes. His gaze sharpened. Your phone is never far from you. Evelyn again. She's my friend. She's divorced. The word landed like a stone. She fills your head with ideas that aren't healthy for us. Ideas. Claire let the syllable slip like a test. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the desk. That you're missing something. That you need more than what we have. It's nonsense. You have everything, Claire. Everything women your age dream of: security, respect, a beautiful home, a husband who adores you. His tone made it sound like generosity, as if he'd given her a gift she might be careless enough to misplace. Claire swallowed. I'm grateful. His eyes softened, pleased. Good. Gratitude is the foundation of happiness. He reached across the desk and brushed his thumb over her knuckles, the gesture tender in appearance but heavy with ownership. She felt herself go still, like a deer freezing at the snap of a twig. I need you focused this week, he continued. We're hosting the firm's partners on Thursday. No distractions. No Evelyn. Understood. Her throat tightened. Understood. Later, when Daniel had gone upstairs, Claire lingered in the study. She touched the globe, spinning it slowly until her finger stopped on grease. She thought of white houses stacked on cliffs, the blue sea below. A place she had never seen but once promised herself she would. Her phone buzzed. Evelyn again. Still alive? Claire typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, yes. Just tired. Evelyn replied instantly. Tired is code. Talk tomorrow? Claire smiled faintly. She slid the phone into her pocket and whispered, yes. Not to Daniel. Not to the house. To herself. By midnight, Daniel was asleep, his breathing steady beside her. Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of her notepad in the drawer, the list she'd begun. Things that I actually want. She hadn't added to it since brunch. In the dark, she imagined herself writing. To stop asking permission. To stop performing happiness. To live as if I am not afraid. The words pulsed in her chest, daring her to let them out. But she didn't move. Not yet. The facade was still intact. For now. Monday mornings always smelled of coffee and ink. Daniel left early, briefcase in hand, tie crisp, his kiss perfunctory. Claire waited until the sound of the garage door had vanished before exhaling, as if she'd been holding her breath all weekend. The house was silent. Too silent. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, poured herself the coffee Daniel always claimed was too strong, and opened the notepad from her nightstand. Things that I actually want. The 3 lines from last night stared back at her like quiet conspirators. To stop asking permission. To stop performing happiness. To live as if I am not afraid. Her pen hovered, then she added, to have a voice that doesn't tremble. The doorbell rang. She startled, nearly sloshing coffee onto the page. When she opened the door, Evelyn stood there, sunglasses perched on her head, hair windblown, holding 2 paper bags that smelled of croissants. I was in the neighborhood, Evelyn announced, sweeping past her. And by neighborhood, I mean I drove 20 minutes because I knew you wouldn't call me back otherwise. Claire laughed despite herself. Daniel doesn't like. Daniel isn't here. Evelyn set the bags on the counter and pulled out a buttery crescent, tearing it in half. Eat. You look like you've been living on air and politeness. Claire hesitated, then bit into the croissant. The taste, flaky, indulgent, defiantly unnecessary, felt like rebellion. Evelyn studied her. So, how's the prison ward? Do they still let you out for good behavior? Claire shot her a look. Don't. I'm not joking. Evelyn leaned closer, voice softening. You're shrinking, Claire. You're so careful, so quiet. That's not you. Claire sipped her coffee, staring at the steam. I don't know who I am anymore. That's because you've been living in Daniel's story, not yours. Evelyn reached across the counter, covering Claire's hand. You deserve a plot line of your own. The words pierced, sharp and liberating. A plot line of her own. Claire felt something stir, like embers under ash. That afternoon, instead of ironing napkins for Thursday's dinner, Claire drove. No destination, just roads curling out of town, trees blurring green and gold. She turned up the radio louder than Daniel would have tolerated and rolled the windows down. The wind tangled her hair, she didn't fix it. At a red light, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, flushed cheeks, wild strands across her face, eyes alive. She smiled, not the rehearsed hostess smile, but something rawer, unexpected. For the first time in years, she thought, I remember this woman. Back home, she tucked the notepad into her purse, instead of the drawer. It felt like contraband, like a key to a door she hadn't opened yet. When Daniel came home, she greeted him as usual. Dinner was on the table, the silverware aligned. But inside, the sparks Evelyn had kindled flickered quietly, refusing to go out. He asked about her day. She said fine, but her mind whispered more than fine. Mine. Daniel didn't notice. He never noticed. And Claire, for the first time, was glad. Because the less he noticed, the more room her fire had to grow. By Thursday, the house gleamed like a showroom. The partners' dinner had been prepared with Daniel's meticulous hand guiding every decision, which wine, which playlist, which flowers. Claire had followed the choreography, as always. But inside, she carried the secret weight of her notepad in her purse, the ink of her once burning hotter each day. The sparks were there. She could feel them. They wanted more oxygen. That night, after the partners left with handshakes and praise, Daniel closed the door behind the last guest. His smile dimmed, the charm vanishing like stage lights cut. Well, he said, pouring himself a whiskey, that went better than expected. Except, his eyes sharpened. You kept interrupting when I was talking about the new initiative. Claire froze, her hand still on a tray of empty glasses. I wasn't interrupting. I was adding context. You don't need to add context. His tone cooled. When I'm speaking, you listen. That's how we look polished. She set the tray down too hard. The crystal clinked dangerously. Polished. Yes. He sipped. Do you want people thinking you're unruly? That we're not aligned? Claire's throat tightened. Aligned isn't the same as silent. Daniel looked at her as though she were a child throwing a tantrum. You're tired. You don't mean that. I do. The words escaped before she could smother them. Her pulse thundered in her ears. I am tired, Daniel. Tired of being your prop. Tired of being edited out of my own life. The silence after was heavy, electric. Daniel set his glass down slowly. Careful. No. Her voice shook, but it didn't stop. You control everything, what I wear, who I see, what I say. I can't breathe in this house without wondering if I'm pleasing you. And I'm done. His jaw flexed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to that calm, dangerous register. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound? I've given you everything. Everything. Claire's hands trembled, but she didn't back away. You've given me a cage. His eyes flashed. For a heartbeat, she thought he might strike her. Instead, he gripped her arm, not bruising, but firm enough to leave no doubt. You're upset. Tomorrow you'll come to your senses. Her fear collided with fury. She yanked her arm free. Maybe tomorrow I won't be here. The words stunned them both. They hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Daniel's expression hardened. Don't be ridiculous. He turned away, dismissing her like an unruly note in a symphony. Go to bed, Claire. She didn't move. She stood rooted to the rug, heart pounding, realizing something profound. She had said it. Out loud. To him. Maybe tomorrow I won't be here. It wasn't a plan yet. It wasn't safe. But it was the truth, and once spoken, truths have a way of expanding until they can't be ignored. Upstairs, Daniel slipped easily into sleep, but Claire sat awake, the notepad open on her lap. She added a new line, hand steady now. To leave, even if it terrifies me. When she closed the notebook, her chest felt lighter. Not free, not yet. But lighter. The facade had cracked. And once cracks appear, walls never look the same again. The morning after the crack, the house behaved as if nothing had happened. Sun on the banister, citrus in the air, the same playlist humming at a volume Daniel deemed civilized. He ate his yogurt, read the markets, and kissed her forehead like a man who had solved a problem by declaring it solved. Claire moved through the familiar choreography, but something inside her had shifted a degree, the way a picture hangs straight to everyone else and crooked to the person who knows it too well. When Daniel backed the car out and the garage door sealed with its final vacuumed hush, her shoulders dropped an inch. The silence was not empty today. It felt like a room with a window cracked open. She made tea, the strong tannic kind Daniel called mud, and carried it to the kitchen table with her notepad. A new line waited in her head, precise as a shopping list item. To have an account in my own name. The words landed on the page with the thunk of something solid. She stared at them until the kettle, forgotten but still warm, let out a soft metal sigh. She got dressed in jeans and a sweater Daniel said washed her out and put on lipstick he said was too loud. In the mirror, she looked like a woman leaving for errands. In the mirror, she looked like a woman about to commit a small, beautiful crime. At the bank, the air smelled of carpet cleaner and printed money. Claire took a number and sat between a man counting coins into a paper sleeve and a college student in a sweatshirt that said state. Behind the counter, a woman with silver hair and wire-framed glasses called, "Next." Claire stood. "I'd like to open a checking account," she said, steady, like she was ordering coffee. The woman, her name tag read Marisol, smiled. "Of course. Individual or joint?" "Individual." "Mailing address?" Claire hesitated. "Is it possible to have statements, not mailed?" Her voice softened. "Or sent to a P.O. box?" "Electronic only?" Marisol suggested, eyes kind. "We can do that. And if you want a P.O. box, there's a post office 2 blocks over." She slid a form across the desk, tapping the line. "You don't have to explain. Half my job is setting women up to have options." Claire blinked. Heat rose behind her eyes, surprising, grateful. "Thank you." They picked an account with no monthly fee and a debit card that would arrive in plain packaging. Her signature shook on the first line, steadied on the second. When Marisol asked for an initial deposit, Claire slid a sealed envelope across the desk. Checks from small freelance jobs done years ago, never cashed because she told herself she didn't need the money. Marisol counted. "You've been saving a while," she said softly, as if noting a long winter ending. "Since I was 30, Claire said, and didn't correct herself. When she left the bank, she went straight to the post office. The man at the counter was bored and gentle. The form for a box asked for identification. The key was heavy in her palm, cold and perfect. Box 317. A number that felt like a password. In the parking lot, she texted Evelyn, "Coffee Wednesday confirms." "I did a thing. Evelyn, tell me everything." Claire sent a photo of the bronze keys cradled in her hand. Evelyn sent back a row of fire emojis and one of a woman sprinting. She honored her promise to herself. She went to book club. Not the excuse, not the I'll see, but the actual thing. Claire parked in front of a yellow bungalow that smelled like sautéed garlic and basil, and the noise of women's voices lifted through the screen door, bright as birds. She stepped into warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "Claire," someone shouted. "Wine or seltzer?" "Both," she said, and the table roared in approval. They debated the novel with the ferocity of women who have had to explain themselves too many times. Why the protagonist stayed, why she left, why leaving wasn't the end. Evelyn watched Claire more than she spoke, a carbonated quiet in her eyes. When the group drifted toward dessert, Evelyn pressed a napkin into Claire's hand, folded like a fortune cookie. Inside, a list. Attorney. Therapist. Shelter hotline. The names had stars next to them. Evelyn had done the sifting so Claire wouldn't have to. "This isn't a declaration," Evelyn murmured. "It's a parachute." Claire nodded. Her fingers closed around the napkin like a relic. She didn't have to use it. She could carry it. Some objects are power even when they never leave your pocket. On the way home, Claire and Evelyn detoured through a drive-thru and ate fries in the dark, feet on the dashboard, salt on their tongues. They laughed about their 20s and almost texted people they shouldn't. They didn't. For 20 minutes, the car was a time machine, and Claire let a version of herself climb into the front seat, a Claire who swore loudly and didn't apologize for taking the last fry. When they finally pried themselves out of the bubble, Evelyn said, "Do one small thing every day that is yours." "Like what?" Claire asked. "Like drink the mud," Evelyn said, grinning. "Like ignore his call if you're in the bath. Like change your phone's passcode." Claire's stomach dipped. "He knows my passcode." "So change it," Evelyn said, simple as air. "To something you know." That night, Claire lay in bed with her phone under the covers, heart hammering like she was 16. She typed a code that meant something only to her, a date no one else would connect, a place name she'd never said aloud. She turned off location sharing. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" She pressed yes and felt like she'd erased a map someone else had drawn on her skin. Daniel shifted beside her, mumbling in sleep. She set the phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling until the fear and the thrill braided themselves into a quiet rope she could hold. The next day, Claire went to the community college 2 towns over to pick up a catalogue, the lie so mild it barely qualified. She walked the brick paths between buildings, students hurrying with backpacks and dreams that hadn't learned to whisper. In a hallway that smelled like whiteboard markers, she found a flyer, Grant Writing 101, turning words into funding. 6 Tuesday nights. She took a photo, then peeled the flyer off the board and folded it into her purse. At home, she set a calendar reminder and labeled it with a name Daniel would never click on, dermatology. She also refurbished her LinkedIn, old job titles polished, a new headshot cropped from a photo where she'd been standing half behind a friend's shoulder. In the About section, she typed, "I help teams say what they mean so people can hear it." Then she made a new email address, one that didn't carry her married name, one that felt like a door marked private. She sent it to 2 contacts from the nonprofit gala. Within an hour, a reply pinged from a development director she'd once rescued mid-speech. "Do you still do messaging? We need help with a donor letter that doesn't sound like a donor letter." Claire wrote back, "Yes. I'd love to help, scope and rates attached." She invented a rate that made her wince and then breathed through it. 10 minutes later, deal. She made the thumbnail of the email bigger and read the word deal as if it were a compliment. She wrote for 3 hours in the upstairs guest room, the door closed, the old desk angled away from the window so she wouldn't watch the driveway for Daniel's return. Words flowed in a way they hadn't in years, like a river remembering where it used to run. When she sent the draft, her fingers trembled, not with fear this time, but with anticipation that belonged entirely to her. Money arrived the next day, a digital transfer into Box 317's account. $2,500. Claire refreshed the screen 3 times to be sure the number stayed. She stared until the edges of the digits softened. Then she took $40 of it out in cash and drove to a sporting goods store where the mannequins all looked like they had opinions about hydration. She bought running shoes Daniel would call clownish. She laced them in the parking lot and jogged, badly, gloriously, around the back of the building, laughing at the stitch in her side and the way her breath sounded like a truck downshifting. She stopped and put her hands on her knees and wanted to cry from the simple fact of being in motion for no one but herself. On the way home, she detoured to the nursery and bought a rosemary bush. Daniel liked peonies. She liked plants that could flavor a stew and scent a bath and survive a neglectful week. She planted it in a terracotta pot and set it on the kitchen windowsill, the needles brushing the glass when the pane warmed. When Daniel came home, he glanced at it and said nothing, the way people ignore a minor character they don't realize will be important in Act 3. Small acts compounded. She moved the notepad from the nightstand to her purse, then to the lining of her coat, then to the glove compartment. She liked the feeling of reaching into different places and finding the same spine, like a friend waiting in every room. She told Daniel she had a new book club selection to pick up from a store across town and instead drove to the city to watch matinee crowds spill out, their faces blotched with tears or laughter, each one choosing a next thing. She stood outside the theater and let herself want, to sit in a velvet seat and be transported, to stand at a lectern and read words she'd written aloud to people who had chosen to come. At home, she switched the dinner playlist to something with percussion and left it there even after Daniel arrived. He palmed his tie, cocked his head, and then, remarkably, said nothing. She realized he often said nothing because he trusted that she would translate his preferences without words. She turned the music up a notch. He arched a brow. She smiled and didn't move. "What's for dinner?" he asked finally. "Pasta with rosemary," she said. He looked at the windowsill. "Is that new?" "A gift from a friend," she lied, and the lie didn't taste like guilt. It tasted like protective coloration. He ate. He didn't notice the new password under her thumb, the course schedule labeled as dermatology, the way her phone sat face up. "Partners liked you last week," he said between bites. "Well done, not interrupting." Her fork paused midair. "I didn't promise that." He looked up, surprise flickering. "Excuse me." She took a sip of wine and met his eyes. "I didn't promise that," she repeated, gentler this time. "I contributed where it made sense." A long beat stretched like a rubber band. Daniel's jaw worked, then decided against a tug of war. He set his napkin down deliberately. "Let's not revisit." "I'm not revisiting," she said, and took another bite of pasta. "I'm clarifying." He stared at her as if she were a painting he couldn't decide was genius or offensive. Then he laughed without humor. "You've been spending too much time with Evelyn." "Maybe," she said, and smiled, and didn't apologize. On Tuesday, the real Tuesday, she walked into the Grantwriting 101 classroom and sat at a desk that still had a carved heart in the wood, R+A. The instructor was a woman in her 60s with gray coils and the voice of a person who had asked for money and been told no enough times to make no uninteresting. "Grant writing is not begging," she said, chalk in hand. "It's translation. You tell a funder's priorities the story of your impact in a language they can approve." Claire's pen flew. She wrote the sentence down twice. Translation. Story. Approve. During the break, a younger woman with a nose ring leaned over. "Your notes are intense. You a writer?" Returning to it, Claire said. "Good." The woman smiled. "We need grown-ups in this room." Claire laughed, startled into joy by the word. Grown up. It didn't mean stodgy here. It meant useful. When class ended, Claire lingered and asked the instructor a question about outcomes versus outputs. The instructor, her name was Keisha, listened then said, "You have a good ear." She tapped the desk. "Don't let anyone talk you out of it." On the drive home, the sky went sherbet and then indigo. Claire rolled the windows down, hair whipping, shoes on the passenger seat, rosemary in the back like a companion. She looked at the horizon and felt the shape of her life expanding, a room with new doors. The universe, having noticed the expansion, tested it. On Thursday, Daniel came home early. He walked into the kitchen while she was editing the donor letter at the island, laptop open, the rosemary scenting the air. "What's this?" he asked lightly, but his eyes went sharp. "Work," she said, saving the document with a click she hoped sounded casual. "Work." He set his briefcase down carefully, as if the sound might shatter something. "Since when?" "Since this week," she said. She kept her voice even. "I'm consulting again. Part-time." He smiled the way people smile when a child announces she's going to be an astronaut. "We've discussed this." "We have," she said, And I'm doing it anyway. The smile vanished. Why would you complicate things? Because uncomplicated has been synonymous with me being very small. His silence thickened. A vein pulsed in his temple. He placed his palms flat on the island, leaning in. Who is the client? A non-profit. Which one? He was already reaching for her laptop. She closed it gently, placing her hand on the lid. Daniel. He straightened. The room seemed to tilt a fraction. He took a breath, let it out through his nose, recalibrated to calm. I worry about you, he said, choosing the tender blade. You overextend. You get anxious. You said yourself the other night you're tired. I'm tired of asking permission, she said, and the sentence fit her mouth like a key fits a lock. She met his eyes. I'm capable. I'm careful. And I'm doing this. The vein flicked again. He lifted his hands from the counter, smoothed his tie, then his expression. Fine, he said, voice even. For now. But I expect. I know what you expect, she said. And I will manage my work and this house. Because I manage everything. She didn't mean it as a boast. It was a map of the past. She said it without heat, like a weather report. He stared at her. Something passed over his face. Anger, respect, calculation, the old certainty that if he waited she'd fold. He kissed her cheek with formal precision, a stamp, and said, dinner at Russo's tomorrow. I have class, she said. Reschedule. I can't, she lied, and felt no guilt. He left the kitchen. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs was a metronome gone slightly out of time. Claire opened the laptop and stared at the donor letter. Her heart was pounding, yes, but the pounding was information, not panic. She read the line she'd written an hour earlier. Your gift doesn't just fill a budget gap, it transforms a classroom into a place where possibility raises its hand. She smiled. She added, thank you for believing in outcomes measured in lives, not just numbers. She sent it. The reply came back within minutes. Perfect. Sending to the board now. Claire closed her eyes and breathed. The rosemary brushed the glass, a soft shhhhh sound, like approval. That night, when she brushed her teeth, she looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back had lipstick like a decision and a line between her brows that hadn't been there at 30. She put her palm against the glass, remembering her hand on the window days ago, the white canopy billowing in the yard like a cloud that wanted to leave. Not yet, she whispered to the canopy that lived in her imagination. But soon. She turned off the light and slid into bed. Daniel rolled toward her in sleep and then away. Claire lay on her back and felt the small acts she'd assembled line up inside her like stepping stones across a river she'd finally admitted she wanted to cross. None of them were the leap. But together, they formed a path. And tomorrow, she promised herself, she would take the next stone. The confrontation came on a Tuesday, though it could have been any day. That was the thing about tension, it stacked itself in neat invisible layers until something small, absurd even, tipped the pile. This time it was the rosemary. Claire had been chopping sprigs for a roasted chicken, humming under her breath, the kind of melody that slipped out uninvited. She didn't notice Daniel watching from the doorway until he spoke. You've been humming a lot lately. She glanced up, startled. Have I? Yes. His tone was light, but the set of his mouth wasn't. He walked in, loosened his tie. It's distracting. Claire laid the knife down, wiped her hands on a towel. It's just humming, Daniel. He circled the island, picked up the rosemary sprig, rolled it between his fingers. This too. What's with the plant? You've never cared for herbs. I do now, she said, too quickly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You've changed. You're secretive. The password on your phone, the late nights with your laptop. What's going on, Claire? Her chest tightened. For weeks she'd moved carefully, planting her small freedoms like seeds in hidden soil. Now he was sniffing at the ground, suspicious of the green beginning to show. I'm consulting again, she said evenly. I told you. His jaw flexed. I didn't agree. Her pulse thudded in her ears. I don't need your agreement. The air thickened. Daniel set the rosemary down, leaning closer, voice low. Don't forget who built this life. Without me, none of this exists. Claire's voice rose before she could stop it. Without me, it doesn't work. Who do you think makes it seamless? The dinners, the partners, the brunches, the life you parade, do you think it runs on its own? The words shocked even her. They rang in the kitchen, bold and undeniable. Daniel's face darkened. Careful, Claire. Her hands trembled, but she didn't back down. No. I'm done being careful. I'm tired of shrinking so you can shine. He stepped closer, grip landing on her wrist, familiar, possessive. Not bruising, but firm enough to remind her. You don't want to push me. Fear rose sharp and metallic, but beneath it something stronger burned. She pulled her hand free. I already have. Silence crashed between them, heavy as thunder. Daniel's gaze bored into her. For a moment, she thought he might shout, might strike, might finally let the mask slip entirely. Instead he exhaled slowly, smoothed his tie, and said almost too calmly, You're unwell. That's what this is. Stress, hormones. Evelyn's poison in your ear. But I'll forgive it. Because I love you. The words felt like a shackle disguised as silk. Claire steadied her voice. Love doesn't feel like prison. He froze. The sentence hung there, dangerous and bright as fire. Daniel turned away, poured himself a drink with controlled movements. His hands did not shake. You'll come to your senses, he said flatly. You always do. But upstairs, with the notepad open across her knees, Claire wrote with firm strokes. He thinks I will fold. I won't. Her wrist ached from the pressure, but the words were clear. She traced them twice, 3 times, as if engraving them into her own resolve. For the first time, she understood something chilling and liberating. The confrontation wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the end. The plan did not come all at once. It arrived in fragments, like shards of glass she had to fit together until they made a window she could crawl through. Claire had never thought of herself as a strategist, yet in the weeks after the confrontation, her mind worked like a quiet machine. Every smile, every dinner, every exchange with Daniel was rehearsed with precision while beneath the surface, she gathered her exit. It started with money. The secret account at Box 317 grew with each consulting payment, each donor letter, each project that reminded her she could still earn. She deposited cash in small amounts, careful not to trigger questions. Then came documents. On a Tuesday when Daniel was at the club, Claire opened the safe in his study. She knew the code, of course she did, he'd boasted once that trust meant nothing was hidden. She slipped out her passport, her birth certificate, and the deed copies he insisted they store. She scanned them at a copy shop 2 towns away, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a warning, and tucked the copies into a folder marked recipes in her car. She practiced lying. Simple ones. I'll be at yoga. I'm running errands. Book club ran late. Each one small enough to pass, each one layering into a larger disguise, the woman he expected her to be. And always, Evelyn was there. Coffee dates with too loud laughter in public places. Napkins with phone numbers. A quiet, fierce promise, when you're ready we go. The tipping point came on a Friday evening. Daniel had been drinking more lately, or maybe she was simply noticing it more. He came home tense, irritation sharp in the air. Dinner's late, he said, though it was only 6. I lost track of time, she replied, heart steady. You've been distracted for months. He slammed the fridge. I should never have let you start working again. It's ruining us. Claire felt the words like sparks landing on dry wood. She thought of her list, of the rosemary, of the students at the community college laughing in the hallway. She thought of her bank account, of the key in her purse, of Evelyn waiting with her wide, unflinching eyes. And she knew. It has to be now. Saturday morning, Daniel announced he had a golf game. Claire kissed his cheek, packed his lunch, watched him drive away. She stood at the window until the tail lights vanished, then moved fast. The suitcase had been hidden in the guest room closet, packed with essentials, clothes, toiletries, the notepad, the rosemary bush wrapped in a damp towel, absurd but necessary. She carried it to the garage, loaded it into the trunk. Her hands shook as she locked the door behind her. Every sound seemed louder, the squeak of her shoes, the click of the key, the suitcase wheels bumping against concrete. At the post office, she checked box 3171 last time. The debit card was there, along with a short note Evelyn had slipped through. "Today is good. Go." Claire drove to Evelyn's. Her friend was already waiting, car idling, trunk open. "You ready?" Evelyn asked. "No," Claire said, climbing out of her own car, dragging the suitcase. Then firmer, "Yes." They switched the luggage, Evelyn promising to park Claire's car in a long-term lot near the airport later. "He won't trace you," she said. "Not quickly, anyway." Claire's chest tightened. "And after that?" "After that, you'll be gone." They drove in silence, the highway stretching like an escape line. Claire gripped the rosemary on her lap, its scent sharp, grounding. She thought of Daniel coming home, finding the house empty, realizing the performance was over. She thought of the mask slipping at last, of his anger. Fear pricked at her spine, but alongside it, exhilaration burned hotter. At the bus station, Evelyn hugged her tight. "This isn't the end, Claire. It's the start." Claire nodded, eyes wet but unbroken. She boarded with her suitcase, the notepad pressed against her ribs. As the bus pulled away, she watched the city shrink, then blur, then vanish. For the first time in decades, the horizon was hers. She didn't know where the road would end. But she knew this, she was no longer asking permission to take it. Claire woke to the sound of gulls. Not the muffled drone of suburban lawnmowers, not Daniel's clipped voice on a phone call. Gulls, wheeling and shrieking, wild and alive. She lay in a small room above a bakery in a seaside town 3 hours from the life she'd left behind. The air smelled of yeast and salt, the sheets were scratchy, and the window framed a square of ocean that seemed too vast to be real. For a moment, fear flickered. He would find her, he would appear in the doorway, briefcase in hand, calm smile masking the storm. But then she reached under the pillow and felt the notepad, its cover warm from her body. She opened it to the last line she'd written. "To leave, even if it terrifies me." She traced the words with her fingertip and realized, she had done it. Terrified, yes, but gone. The first days were clumsy. She stumbled over her own name when renting the room, considered lying but decided against it. She cooked pasta on a hot plate, walked the boardwalk with a paper bag of groceries, pretended not to notice when she startled at every tall man in a navy jacket. And yet, freedom was stitched into even the awkwardness. No one cared when she stayed out past 9. No one corrected her order at the cafe. No one noticed when she hummed off-key while writing in her notepad. She had been invisible for so long inside Daniel's world. Here she was anonymous, which was a different, softer thing. Weeks passed. She began consulting for small non-profits, each project another brick in the foundation of her independence. She learned the bus routes, bought cheap running clothes, jogged along the shore until her lungs burned. She planted the rosemary in a ceramic pot and set it by her window. The scent filled the room when the sea breeze pushed in. She wrote in the notepad every night. The list grew, no longer just survival but possibility. To laugh without checking the room first. To sit in a theater alone and cry at the ending. To own a home with chipped paint and loud neighbors. To wake up with no one else's schedule dictating mine. One evening, she wrote simply, "To be." And then she closed the notepad and wept, not from grief, but from the vastness of what that could mean. Evelyn visited after 2 months, arriving with a tote bag of contraband croissants. "You look different," she said, eyes wide. "How?" Claire asked. "You take up space." Evelyn grinned. "It suits you." They sat on the beach with their shoes off, sand cooling between their toes. Claire told her about the rosemary, about the notepad, about the terror that still woke her some nights. Evelyn listened without pity. When the sun sank into the ocean, Claire realized she hadn't once looked over her shoulder. Daniel's name appeared on her phone only once, in a missed call. She deleted it without opening the voicemail. That too was an act of choice. She knew the scars would linger. She knew there would be days when silence felt heavier than safety, when trust seemed like a foreign language. But she also knew this, she had crossed the river. She had chosen her own stones, one by one, until the shore rose beneath her feet. On her 48th birthday, Claire walked to the bakery downstairs, bought herself a small lemon tart, and carried it to the seawall. She lit a single candle, shielding it from the wind with her hand. She whispered into the flame, "Happy birthday, Claire." The gulls cried overhead. The tide pulled in and out, tireless, steady. The candle flickered, then steadied, just long enough for her to blow it out. The wish she made was simple. It wasn't for escape anymore. It wasn't for safety. It was for the life she had begun here now. A life that was hers.